Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that's hopefully for somebody. I'm your host, Kyle Naranya, and for once, the nobody is joined by somebody, the first official guest of the show, technically. Yeah, that we'll say technically, is Rob Keys, the longest-running Screen Rant employee who manages content planning processes, business development, social media, strategic partnerships, branding and PR for Screen Rant, Collider, and CBR, also known as Comic Book Resources, also known as the Fail Cube on Twitch. Rob, thank you for joining the show.
Can you hear me? Am I here? Are we live?
You are. We are.
This is
live.
the real deal?
This is.
I made it.
I know.
What an intro. Oh my gosh. I need more job titles. I actually have more job titles. I'll give you a little scoop.
Okay.
You heard it here first. You mentioned 3 websites.
I did.
There's going to be a 4th added to that slot very soon. But so stay tuned for that.
I'll ask off the show because I know you won't tell
I'm not going to tell you. You'll find it right. If I remember to update my Twitter bio.
Okay, perfect. Well, we are recording on The Last of Us Day, which happens to actually be my sister's birthday. So shout out Haley, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Haley.
Champagne birthday. And I think she may be the biggest Last of Us fan that I know. So today was, at least in terms of my core group of friends who play video games, you've played Call of Duty, I think, with a couple of them. And we were all just waiting for some official trailer to drop today. And we were very lucky that HBO decided to give us an actual trailer, not 10 seconds of footage, which was incredible. And before we get into that, I think what's most interesting about the way that HBO is choosing to market this show is they know what they have on their hands when you look at the promo scissor reel that they released in, I guess it was end of August. All I remember is that was released while I was waiting for the Red Hot Chili Peppers to come to the stage. So it was a lot trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Was there audio or was it just beautiful winter shots of Calgary, Alberta? But no, there was audio in that, and they did decide to give us... Apparently, I learned this today. Haley told me this, that Joel's birthday is actually also September 26th.
In canon, his birthday is 9/26? Oh, wow. I did not know that.
So, yeah. So, I mean, you can tweet at me if that's wrong, but my sister is in love with this franchise, and we did get the first trailer. So, I don't want to tell you how I felt about it. I deliberately didn't tweet about this because this is all I wanted to talk about. So I have no idea how you feel about this. Have you played the game, the first one?
Oh, not only did I play it, Kyle, I reviewed it for a website called GameRant.com, which is part of our network. I created it many years ago, and I gave it a fat 5 out of 5.
You didn't give it the Ben Kendrick 4 out of 5?
No, I'm a real reviewer, and I do it proper. I played, I reviewed the original PS3 version. Just like timing is so funny, of course, and anyone who played it back then knows this. But it was just in the version of the PS4 coming out. So this was like the game that perhaps more than any other like Sony exclusive, like fully took advantage of the crazy power of the PS3 with its weird architecture back then, which was a huge issue for developers, right? But it was amazing. It was such an amazing follow-up of that gameplay, of the gameplay mechanics of the Uncharted games from Naughty Dog, but with obviously a totally different tone and set of characters. And I thought it was incredible. It was ahead of its time, and we can say that as a fact because they obviously remastered it for PS4, and it just came out again weeks ago on PS5 they just kept the same game and just made it modern graphics basically with some control twerks. But
it's running the models of like the flashback models of Part 2. To my knowledge,
essentially, yeah. They redid, they didn't redo the motion capture and stuff like that, but they redid the models and on the animation and cleaned it up and they increased the frames and it's a whole different thing. But it is the same game. It's just more modern looking. But there's still of course it's been 10 years since then or 9 years. Man, I feel old. 9 years ago that came out. Wow,
it's 2013. Yeah.
I had not not intentionally. I meant to play it recently, but I've not played the sequel yet.
You haven't played Part 2. Interesting.
I have it installed on 2 devices, but I have not played it yet. I think what I want to do is replay Part 1. And this is coming from someone who never, ever replays single-player games.
Or plays single-player games.
Time to play single-player games at all right now. I exclusively play, like, either indie titles that are small or like, of course with you, like the multiplayer games where it's my social aspect at night to reset my mind for the next day. So
Hmm.
I at some point maybe I'll take a real vacation, real vacation, and I'll play both games back to back. So in my head, that sounds amazing. So I'll
It's
do it
something
one
I
day.
haven't done yet is play them back to back. It's interesting because the PS3 was the only Sony console that I didn't own. Like in the original run of
Oh
me
wow.
buying consoles, at that point around the launch of those two, I became a 360 guy because it was Halo back then were good. What a time. Um and so I played the first game on the remastered
PS4.
PS4. When it's
Right.
interesting just in general, where both Last of Us games, part one and two, it's been retitled, were pushing their systems to their absolute limits. Where obviously one, before it was called part one, did that for the PS3, and then I remember playing part two on the four and saying, like, realizing this is the best this thing can do, and playing it with friends in group chats, starting at the same time, and all our PS4s running like freaking jet engines
Oh
because
yeah.
they were barely being able to keep up with that. So at some point, I haven't actually even bought part one yet. I'm in a weird place with this franchise where it's probably one of my favorite game franchises of all time, but with the show coming out, I don't know when I want to revisit the game again because there's a lot that we perfectly segue into the trailer. There are moments that seem familiar in this first. They're calling it a teaser, which who really cares? It's a trailer, but I'm most looking forward to seeing how they rework the overall narrative of the first game as well as the DLC because there are clear shots in this, like getting into the nitty gritty of it, that are pulled from Left Behind. So, like the way that Neil is going to pull in things that were just a DLC after the first game came out, and then Craig Mazin, who made what I would say maybe be one of the best shows of the 2020s with
Chernobyl?
Chernobyl. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these two working together, I think if you're a fan of the games, I was really excited by what this trailer has shown so far. They've got the ambiance of one clicker is already terrifying.
Yeah, and there's one teaser shot of a clicker face at the end there with like
Mm-hmm.
a very symmetric looking one though. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's true. It is. It's very symmetrical.
Uh, yeah. I look. I think the biggest telling sign is well, it's HBO. They don't mess around with these premium adaptations. I mean, you look at anything, but even like Watchmen, which is a high, a high genre type thing, right? But definitely get Chernobyl vibes, but on a larger scale, which is cool. And you can't, like, you literally can't get a better cast. Like, and you can tell, um, just from Neil Druckmann's involvement and how proud they are to kind of talk about this and showcase it. Like, it just seems like everyone is so happy with what they have so far and how they talk about it, how they present it. And I'm actually, it is, you mentioned up front, Last of Us Day, so I'm glad they appeased the fans. But there was no real need to drop a trailer or a teaser right now. This is not coming out till next year, and there's
Mm-hmm.
so many other things on the way. We're in the midst of like HBO's like record-setting Game of Thrones right now. In fact, they almost could have timed it to drop it last night as a teaser before. If you watch an HBO Max or we watch it in Canada on Crave, maybe like you get a little teaser of other stuff on HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
They could have had that. You know what I mean? Right
But
before that. Maybe they still can next episode, I suppose. But
HBO Max drives me crazy. I have both for different reasons because I can't officially. This is the dumbest thing. This is going to be my little rant because nobody else is going to want to hear this. And it's worse when it's just me doing it. I think the listeners would agree when I just go off on my own. Usually I cut that on my own. But the one thing that Crave does that I don't understand that HBO Max cannot figure out, and I've spoken to friends about this who have, I mean, we're in Canada. I have a Jordan Romano, who's the current closer for the Toronto Blue Jays right now, if you're watching live on Twitch. But you can't stream HBO content live on HBO Max, which I don't understand. Like but Crave lets you do that. And I'm glad they did wait because then this day had stuff. Like you're always going to get kind of the metaphorical, and I guess the perfect word to describe the fallout of whatever happened in House of Dragon or Game of Thrones. And then to have this be the Last of Us stuff, which is obviously there's very Chernobyl stuff. And if you're unaware it's of the games. The thing that I don't want to hear anybody say to me is like, isn't this just like The Walking Dead? You go play the game. I don't want to hear that conversation. This has good characters and actually tells an interesting story and doesn't end with a cliff.
I actually care about what happens after, you know what I mean, a little bit. So
well, even on a script level, like I don't think it's the art book I've read for the first game. What I'm most interested in seeing is, does the writing hold up to the way that we look back at that first game? Because if done well, this should be one of those shows where HBO is winning awards for performances, particularly like Joel and Sarah. I don't want to say anything, like no spoilers if you haven't seen or played the games, watched the cinematics or anything. I think this is going to be one of those shows, maybe more similar to Watchmen, where people aware of it are going to be diving in, and maybe the word of mouth will spread. It's like, you need to watch this show, as opposed to something like House of the Dragon, which is just exploding with millions of viewers week per week, even with the cast change. Spoiler alert, I actually haven't even seen episode 6 yet because I've been solo parenting right now, so
it's very different.
Yes,
not just for the obvious reasons, but it was weird. It was a weird one.
What's the time? I mean, I did the first 2 episodes on the podcast like weekly, and I decided it wasn't worth it. And I'm glad I did, because 5 in, I think I have a lot to say, at least in the first half of the show. I've had to compile my notes for that. But I think it's clear that HBO knows what they have on their hands. We're looking back at the marketing, and you and I are on the internet most of our time of the day, where Watchmen felt subtler, and even stuff like Succession, that kind of like grew out of ironically, the virtual water cooler conversation.
Yeah, pure word of mouth. That's how I got it. Everyone was just talking about it, and there's been a couple shows like that. Watchmen too. Watchmen was weird because it was like
nobody knew what it was.
Sure. Yeah, it did. There wasn't like a push or a buzz about it, but everyone who did talk about it was like, "This is awesome." And I think ratings wise, it probably didn't perform at all. But I think quality wise, like that's something you want in your archive. And it was I think a big
until HBO Max deletes it
for Damon. Yeah, oh my God, could you imagine? For Damon Lindelof, right? That was a big. You know, people like The Leftovers. That wasn't my thing, but for me, like this was like, oh yeah, this guy can actually.
He's back.
You know what I mean? He's back. Yeah.
I'm glad we got this trailer today. You're right. They totally could have dropped it yesterday, and that would have been fine for me just to have footage. I'm more curious on how this first season breaks down, because I know Neil has talked about like they wrote a lot of backstory for other characters.
Yep.
Like we're likely going to get more of Tess. Like I said earlier, there are clear hints at the Left Behind, which happens prior to Ellie meeting Joel. And
we also, from the game, when they first had that little teaser thing at the was it the Game Awards or the Summer Games Fest?
Whatever was going on in August, I'm not sure.
It was Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest, and Druckmann came out, and they brought the voice talents, so like Troy Baker. They were there, and they said they're playing characters in the show as well, but they did not disclose who they're playing. So I'm curious. I'm curious who they're playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so. Not listed at all. I mean, but the benefit of, I think this will be similar to the show we're going to be talking about very shortly, where I'm hoping this is a slow burn, where I don't want the first season of this show to just, like, it won't be the first game, because that would be insane, especially given the fact that, like, in a third-person shooter, which is the style of gameplay for this, it's survival, obviously.
I think they can really push it out, and it's because you play the game. It's Joel and Ellie the whole time. It feels like, you know what I mean. But we know there's a lot more time for other characters, obviously, and I bet because of that, you're going to get multiple weaving subplots of like in the game. There's no other screen time, right? You're either one of the two.
Yeah.
In the show, you're going to get other plot lines that take screen time, so they can really extend it and add in lore and more character.
I want a Tommy episode with Gabriel Luna. Like that, yeah. I want that kind of stuff.
Why would they? Why wouldn't they? Like he's incredible, right? So like,
he's a Terminator.
He's a Ghost Rider.
Was a Ghost Rider.
Was it? He could still be. You never know.
I don't know. ABC.
They'll bring him back. I'd like to see them bring him back.
What if you could pick one? Nicolas Cage as Ghost Rider or Gabriel Luna as Ghost Rider?
I think for real they could do a Gabriel Luna Ghost Rider, and they were going to in Hulu until the whole thing fell apart,
And
right?
Sam
So
Elliott as Ghost Rider, the original Ghost Rider on a horse.
yeah, I may skip that one,
I guess
but
we'll no, but if they're doing, I mean, this is a rabbit hole we could fall down because if they do Secret Wars, technically Sam Elliott could come back as Thunderbolt Ross.
I think you'll get Nick Cage teased both as him as Superman somewhere, maybe in the Flash, and then I think you also see him as Ghost Rider in Secret Wars.
It bothers me that with all of these, like I watch, I would say essentially all of the DC animated like to home video films. Why they didn't just animate Tim Burton's version? Like, there's no way
Oh yeah,
Nick wouldn't do it. Christopher Walken does pretty much everything, and like just make it like do an animated version.
that's a good point. I'm
It's
surprised they haven't.
right.
Or
It
the
costs
HBO Max miniseries, even
yeah
like anything.
$10 million to make like a decent looking animated feature or series. I don't know. All right, there's the. Go ahead.
Let me bring you back to two tangents.
Okay.
You mentioned Fallout as a pun or whatever, and
Yes.
I forgot. Like they are making a Fallout show for. I think Amazon's making this, right, for Prime Video.
I believe so.
I think it is. But man, it's funny because you go back years ago, and I remember writing about this for Gamer and Screen Rant. Like, you mentioned it for 14, 13 years ago, back when like the film rights for games or early franchises like Mass Effect and Assassin's Creed, before they became what we know them as today, the rights are being picked up to become movies, and all of us who were fans like, no, 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 like these games like 30, 40 hours deep and character rich. You need a TV show. But back then, what did you have? You had like
The Prince of Persia, starring Jake Gyllenhaal.
No, but yes, big budget fantasy films which fail. But that one banked over 300 mil, but it was bad.
For many reasons.
But in terms of platforming, you couldn't put it on regular TV because you had regular HBO, but it wasn't like as massive as it is now. And what do you have? Premium cable, I guess. Like
HBO really, ironically, would have been the only place for something like this. Or
right,
I guess
back then they were catering towards old. It was so old Hollywood back then in terms of the type of things they were doing. It wasn't the crazy genre fare you get now, right? So I think Game of Thrones changed everything for everyone, right? So
and then AMC, I guess, would have had Walking Dead, and then honestly, that probably put for at this point, good reason because of like you said, who has been cast in this show. The success of The Walking Dead probably made anybody involved, like who didn't know what they were talking about, be like, nah, we'll hold off. Like we already have another show that's like this.
yeah, but now I think Netflix is spearheading the video game adaptations. They have so many animated ones, and they got some live action ones on the way as well. And now everyone's trying to jump in. Everybody needs one, right? Even The Witcher is a good example of that. Netflix, but like we just said, Amazon with Fallout, HBO Max is getting in this game, and
Who's making Mass Effect? Isn't somebody making Mass Effect?
oh gosh, I don't know. I've been to 2 Comic-Con panels about that. It never even happened. I don't know.
No, what's the other one? It's the BioShock. Did you say that?
I didn't say BioShock. No.
BioShock
But that
is
is one
good.
they're doing too.
BioShock's. But Francis Lawrence is never mind. I haven't talked about it on the show. I don't want to talk about it right now.
All right. Let's move on then.
There's too many things to talk about. Okay, in the show notes, time codes will be listed for Andor. For the sake of the conversation, it will be all spoilers. So if you do want to avoid that part of the conversation, which would be unfortunate because that's the way I was able to weasel Rob away from playing Warzone to talk about that, and I recommend you check it out because he's been sitting on this show for almost 2 whole months. Let's get into Andor. All right, Cassian Andor. I think it's so funny that we are at this show now because this was one of the first initial announced things for Disney Plus. It was The Mandalorian and Andor, and for a while it seemed like maybe Andor was going to be Armor Ward. But I guess that is technically still on the pre-production slate. So we have the Gilroys have given us 3 episodes of TV. I believe the first 2, no, all 3. I didn't look at that. I should have looked at that ahead of time. Toby Haynes directed all 3. If you were a fan of British television, he directed several episodes of Sherlock, which I thoroughly enjoyed that show as a whole. So you've been sitting on this for almost 3 months? No, 2 months.
2 months. I think almost exactly 2 months of the day, I think.
So what did you like? Did you watch them? You're a big advocate for the consumer having the choice. Did you watch all 3 which I guess that would be just under 2 hours? No, maybe close, under 2 hours. Or did you watch them one at a time?
No. I'm not an idiot. I watched all three back to back to back. Because how could you not? I had the opportunity to, and they were incredible. Like I was so, and I said this on our podcast. What is Podcast X? It was
Shout out. I haven't listened to your episode yet because I knew I was going to talk to you about it.
good. Yeah, because Kofi, one of our special guests on that show, had from comicbook.com. He's a host there as well, and a senior writer on features. He and I both saw screeners. He saw the recent set. So yeah, I got the screeners, needless to say, like mid-July-ish, or Comic-Con time, right? And they were planning the junket and the premiere around that time, and I watched them, and then there was like a shift in the screeners or something. They added a couple days, and then they just delayed by a full month. We don't know why, but you could suppose that's something to do with timing it alongside She-Hulk, right? If you notice when She-Hulk has like an episode, a bit of a filler episode, and slows down, that's the same time they do the premiere for Andor. So I'm sure that's not a coincidence.
Well,
But they're also
burying another female-led Marvel show under a Star Wars show.
Good. Yeah, well, they gave She-Hulk a good 4 weeks, 5 weeks to shine there.
Yeah, which they didn't to Miss Marvel.
No, Miss Marvel got lost in the Obi-Wan buzz, even though Miss Marvel was a superior product, I think, than Obi-Wan. I mean, of course,
absolutely.
Obi-Wan has all the fame, of course, it's Star Wars, but it's like, no, Miss Marvel,
matters moving forward.
It's hard to say because as characters, I love them both, but in terms of show quality, Miss Marvel is, I think, better because it nails the important parts, right?
Well, and the lead actor. Like that's, you can't even debate it. You come at me on Twitter if you want. Shang-Chi, best movie of Phase 4, best show, current actual. Well, you know what, doesn't even matter because I really like She-Hulk, and Tatcha Maslany's from Regina, so it doesn't matter. She's also Canadian.
I'm actually quite enjoying She-Hulk for what it is. I find it like really fun to watch. Like, there's nothing that bothers me about that show. Whereas Miss Marvel, as much as it might be one of my favorite Disney Plus things, like I was very bothered by the middle of it. I thought like the time jump episode was weird and out of place, and it felt very like ABC television family stuff. You know what I mean? It was very, they didn't hit the good parts there. And then the clandestine, the villains of that, and the dimensional stuff they're doing, like it's complete nonsense. And same with the other faction, like it was all nonsense actually. The only thing I cared about is Kamala and her friends and her journey, right? And it almost didn't matter how goofy the thing she was going through was because she sold me on it, and her group of friends and her family especially. That made that show stand out above the rest. But like lore wise and overall story arc, it's completely ridiculous. But I almost forget it because it doesn't even matter. I don't remember that part of it. I remember everything else that's strong.
Great intro. The wild stuff about it because for a while it seemed like in the early days of the MCU it did feel kind of subdued, and now we're getting like what we're getting with it. It just everything's insane, and like I love the insanity of it. Like She-Hulk is the same thing where it's like it is just a lawyer comedy that's focusing on this one woman's reaction to this insane world that the MCU is experiencing.
And it lets them fill in so many cool gaps. And then wait until you see Werewolf by Night. I watched that this weekend.
I am very curious about that because I did have a very long D23 episode.
But without any spoilers, you could say it's completely different. It's not called comedy. It's more horror than comedy, right? And it just has fun with that. And it has this epic presentation. It feels like you almost got like Indiana Jones music vibes because Giacomo does like everything, the score and the direction, and it's very different. So I'm glad Marvel's at a point now where like, hey, what do you want to do? You want to do a horror show? You want to do a comedy? You want to break the fourth wall? You want to have a crazy different intro and play with the logos and animations and title cards or even Miss Marvel? Like I love the style of like where you can see her thoughts in the background, right? And
Blinding Light has been stuck in my head for like 4 months because of Miss Marvel. The Weeknd, also Canadian. But it's 100%. Funny. Good call. It's a perfect segue that you were talking about, like now with the Disney Plus stuff and being able to, I don't know why I'm talking with my hand so much, blend into different genres and like different levels of maturity with the content. That Andor is scratching the same sort of itch I'm hoping we get from something like what they're going to do with Daredevil Born Again. Now, is Andor overly violent? No, but it feels like it's treated with a significantly larger amount of maturity in terms of like the character relationships, the dialogue that's happening between the certain characters. I think it does introduce memorable characters, but it's a slow burn of the world where, and for the first time, I know Chris Agar was really excited about this. We finally got to see official timeline stuff with BBY before Yavin, before the Battle of Yavin. If you don't know what that means. So that essentially means the end of New Hope. So we do see that this does take place prior to Rogue One. No, he did not. I guess really, the movie's 6 years old. If you didn't see Rogue One, you're probably not listening to two Canadians talk about the prequel series to that. Regardless, no, this is not a sequel. He did not survive the planet going boom. This is really getting to see a sleazy, to some degree, person surviving the outer rim of the galaxy, probably at the Galactic Empire's height. And we do also get some small office comedy bits, which may not be my favorite, but I do like their blue and orange uniforms. They are better than the classic Nazi gray, that's for sure.
Yeah, I love that you could watch the show and you could someone could just say it's not Star Wars.
Yep.
It's a very serious political thriller with real stakes and intensity and a build up. It's very much like you talked about one of the directors, but you look at the writers and they wrote the earlier seasons of House of Cards, right? If you look at what's his name? Bo Willimon, and then you have Stephen Schiff, who did, to me, one of the greatest shows ever made, The Americans. He produced and wrote that.
This show feels so. I was gonna bring that up when I was thinking of like, things I need to talk to Rob about. There were so many elements that felt like The Americans.
FX, the greatest cable network, which is now on Hulu, I guess. But yeah, and it's very much that. It's like they take their time. They have to embed themselves. You see a bit of their lives. You see everybody has to live a double life, which is straight up both of those shows, House of Cards and The Americans, and they have to like plan out missions, and it takes a while to get there. And there's a larger objective, but obstacles along the way. I think we're seeing the first act of that. I'm very excited. In fact, it's so well done. And just seeing I've seen the first 4 episodes. The first 3 have aired, so I'm not going to get too much of the spoilers in 3 or 4 because in my mind they overlap a little bit. But it is the first act of the first of 2 seasons. We can say they already confirmed the second season. They're each 12 episodes. 12. That's it. I almost wish they had the ability, maybe they will, given the amount of episodes, of doing like other missions on the way to Rogue One, because it'd be nice to see what they can do once he becomes a spy. Because this show is like him getting there, like what, we meet him, you call him a sleazy.
Being Jack Ryan is essentially what's happening.
He's a guy in the street who's got debts. He's like the more badass, I don't want to say badass, but the more real, down on his luck version of Han Solo, right? Mm-hmm. Without all the heroic connotations when you meet him, right?
And so the suaveness of Harrison Ford.
Yeah, and you know that from the. Well, I think Diego Luna does have a crazy charm to him still, because
absolutely him and Bix have a relationship for sure.
Because he's a con man, he has to. That's his thing, right? Yeah. But once you find out why he's a con man, you find out there's a motivating factor behind it all, and you find out he does have family and friends who are loyal to him despite all of that. Like there's a reason for that, and there's something special about him, and you get to see the beginnings of that, which is exciting. But I'm very curious about his journey to get to a point where he has a cause to fight for, and then once he's there, I'm very excited by the idea of him doing missions. Maybe season 2 is just that. It's like him doing missions before the big one in Rogue One. So
it'd be really awesome if this ends similarly to how Rogue One did, and we actually get to see like just before what he was doing when he bumps into like Jyn Erso, and then you could just watch this all at once.
I think that's exactly what it is.
It'd be amazing.
I think this is the other side of the book Catalyst, and I've talked about this in our podcast, but there's a novel called Catalyst, which is a prequel to Rogue One, which is a prequel to New Hope, and Catalyst shows all the lives of the Erso family, and what's the Krennic, the Ben Mendelsohn's character in that.
I'm Ben Mendelsohn. I'm here to play bad guy. My name's Ben Mendelsohn.
Yeah. Although in twist, he's a good guy in the Marvel MCU.
We'll
so far.
See. Secret Invasion has not aired
yet. He's
so
likable. You got to keep him good. He needs a role like that. He can look bad, but he'll be good.
Was it milkshakes he was drinking the whole time in Captain Marvel?
It was amazing. Yeah. Milkshakes or some kind of soft drink in a 90s
Slushy
cup or whatever. Yeah. Awesome.
Maybe it's a Capri Sun. That's what it was. The 90s drink of all, or Tang. No, what? It's funny though.
Bidding a Sunny D. Sorry.
I love. What's more? I feel like Sunny D was more aughts. I don't know.
Kool-Aid, maybe.
Kool-Aid, yeah. Kool-Aid, but then you had Jammers. Jammers were like
What's Jammers? I don't know what that is.
Kool-Aid Jammers were the Kool-Aid's version of the Capri Suns.
Oh, in the little
in the pouches. Yeah.
Right.
What I find so funny about this show. So I was watching it with my wife, who has seen. She didn't watch Kenobi with me because she's never seen the prequels. She has no interest to see the prequels. She's seen She's seen all the Disney stuff outside of the cartoons. Those I've had to watch my own. And I'm going to recommend, if you're listening to this and you're still haven't watched the Disney cartoons, I mean, you can skip Resistance, but Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels are the best Disney Star Wars stuff they've done. It's not even debatable. Rogue One, I know, is Rob's favorite, and thinks it's the best, it's certainly a fantastic film. But in terms of like actual Star Wars, the Battle of Mandalore, which is the back half of the final season of Clone Wars, is the best Star Wars in the 21st century. And I can say that because none of the original trilogy came out in the 21st century. They came out in the 20th century.
Okay. I got you.
Darth Maul actually matters in that story. But what I find so funny is for people who were old enough to realize all of the flaws, and I should say, particularly with me, I was old enough to realize how bad the prequels were when they came out. They're not my Bible, like a friend of ours, Kate Onder. Those movies suck. But the politics of those was so poorly handled, and the ideas on paper, I think, if you were to pitch somebody what those movies probably were in the pit, like when George was saying what they were going to be, they probably did sound interesting. But the fact that I am so excited to see like Stellan Skarsgård, and who plays her? I should have looked this up ahead of time. Genevieve O'Reilly, who did voice Mon Mothma in Star Wars Rebels, like to see the inner workings and the politics going on in the Empire with the birth of the rebellion. Like we haven't, again, we're in full spoilers. We haven't seen them we've seen Stellan Skarsgård, who might be wearing a wig. I don't know. It's very like Targaryen blonde, and I don't think that's his natural hair color, but that's besides the point. It was very distracting.
Wait. Have we met Genevieve O'Reilly in episode 3? I can't remember.
No, we haven't, but like she's in the marketing. So like she may show up...
non-spoiler. You're gonna meet her in episode 4,
okay,
and you get to see what's really going on with some of that. So I'll say that much.
So that's like the fact that there are elements of the politics of Star Wars that actually could be really interesting, and given the fact that we have the Gilroys involved, who have said they don't care about Star Wars, maybe the best thing possible for Star Wars at this point, particularly with, even as a diehard Star Wars fan, like I have a Masterworks lightsaber just on my bookshelf to my left. It's nice when somebody doesn't treat every single piece of canon like the Bible. Like you brought up Catalyst the book. Star Wars itself in the Disney era has not treated all of its canon as the obviously more than 10 commandments, but like law of the Star Wars universe. And a great example of that is the Ahsoka novel, which even had the voice actress whose name is escaping me off the top of my...
Ashley Eckstein?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
She narrated the book, so when I've been audibling books for a very long time because I don't give myself time to read them. I listen to them when I drive. But it felt like this is canon because Ashley's doing it. It's canon to what we never saw because Star Wars Clone Wars had been canceled. However, when the final season of Clone Wars came out and we did actually get to see a version of the Battle of the Mandalore, it contradicts a significant amount of that book. So
really?
Yeah, It does. Like there are a lot of things that just don't line up, and most fans, at least the ones that I've spoken to, and you can kind of follow this when it was happening. It's like, I think the beginning of 2020. I don't actually remember. But are the Gilroys going to use this published material, or are they going to be like, you know what? No, it doesn't fit with our story. We're going to do something interesting. Because at least the way that I'm viewing Star Wars content at this point, if it's on the screen, it's part of the canon until otherwise. Because you even change things in canon, like never mind. I'm not going to get into a Mandalorian spiel. I'll get that when we get into season 3 of Mandalorian next year. But the fact that this is being treated like a serious adult drama also, I think, really adds to the aesthetic of how the show looks. And what I was so happy to see was practical sets, a tactile environment that we have not had from a Disney production in the last 2 years, 2+ years. Obviously, things have happened that have prevented large-scale extras and location scouting to happen. But besides the point, it's really shown what the volume's limits are. And having this set that feels like they just built this whole place on barracks, where we get to see Cassian walk that whole stretch and see part of his daily life. I'm like, this is a place. This isn't a 6 or 10 foot by 10 foot piece of set that you have to run around 7 times. because you have a backdrop extending the whole thing, or hiding a girl in your coat, your favorite part of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because you only have a narrow laneway to walk through. Like it makes the world feel even more real, and that's part of what made the original trilogy, I think, so beloved, is so much of it feels lived in.
Yeah, that's where the book Boba Fett failed as well, because they tried to do some wide shots of things happening on Tatooine and the streets and the big battle there, but there's other layers to it. It's a combination of cinematography and the action design, right? So like in
Should we
Book
spin
of Boba
around in our
Fett,
chairs before we say the next thing?
yeah, oh my God, don't get me started. That's a whole other. But yeah, I mean, the production wise, that technically that show is ugly, and but it's the direction was a huge failure because they have all these extras on set, and you talk about lived in, all their costumes look like they were made that day, pristine clean.
Mm-hmm.
They live on a desert planet that has no money, no economy.
And
Why
they
would they
have
look
the
like that?
brightest colors and shiniest metal imaginable.
And like it's like this is like you don't understand. This is not like some weird version of a colorful Blade Runner. This is like a planet that is supposed to be nowhere land with no money, no nothing, no opportunities.
Run
It's
by the
behind the
mob.
times, right? Yeah, exactly. It should be an absolute.
Everything's brown.
So,
Great. It's okay.
uh, um, but uh, but you look at what you're talking about with Andor on this planet, and you see all of these extras, and they're miners, they're factory workers, they're people in the street, they're vendors, they have storefronts, and you see like a wide shot of this whole thing, and everybody in the shot is doing something that's
Mm-hmm.
real. There's people struggling to lift things. You see an alien do a funny bunny hop off a little step. If you look, it's a funny thing on Twitter. And then, but you see all the people moving around and working, and they're not just like
It's like
even in
Star
Obi-Wan.
Wars Flintstones. That's what it reminded me of. Like the opening of Star Wars or Flintstones, where you see Fred's kind of like as he's leaving his job, clocking in, and you see everybody. I mean, it was Hanna-Barbera at the time,
Yeah.
but you see like everything happening has a purpose moving forward. It's not just like people standing there chatting. Like
It's a real place. It's like this is I liken it to this is the first premium and prestige programming on Disney Plus.
mhm.
Outside of National Geographic, all of their shows are subpar compared to the flagship premium properties of any other streaming network, right? Andor is a show that can compete with the Rings of Powers and then the Game of Thrones, where there's like massive set pieces where everyone there has a purpose and they're real. They're from that world, and the locations are big. You can move the camera back. You can let the scene, the environment speak for itself. And Game of Thrones does a wonderful job of that because you look at all the candles in the lit and all the little set decorations in the background, this massive room,
But
and they
then
do
they
such a
forget to
great.
CGI out somebody's fingers. Like, how does
Yeah,
that still
or a
happen?
Starbucks cup. You know what it is? I think oftentimes they're using a wrong clip when they're doing editing and
It's the
or
Spider-Man No
timelines.
Way Home Brazil problem.
Because they're assembling so quickly, so many different shots, and if anything with VFX vendors, it could be grabbing the wrong clips. It's an easy thing to happen in mass production. I don't know. It's annoying, but I'm surprised there's not more of that. I mean, we saw like in Star Wars, they had a person, a gaffer, like out in the set. Remember
Oh,
that? Like
Jeans
in
Guy. Yeah, in
yeah,
Mandalorian
yeah, yeah.
Season
And
2.
it's like
He's got a
it's literally an
Wikipedia
active
page.
person. Amazing, right? So it's just like there are crazy things that
I want
happen.
that toy. I know somebody made it for Comic-Con that year. Somebody made Jeans Guy the toy. And it didn't even have like a head. It was just the torso and the gaff,
Oh, gee,
like the
yeah.
boom arm, which is amazing. Well, one of the things that I immediately was drawn to about this show, and this is something that I feel that Disney, with handling Star Wars as a property, has been really afraid to do, which is have people be unlikable. Like, obviously Kylo Ren has his redemptive arc, but when you are writing fiction, if somebody murders, typically they die, because you, as much as you want to redeem that person, they committed murder, the ultimate sin. There's very few ways to get out of that situation.
Can I tell you something? I don't like this word redemption in these movies, or this universe especially.
No,
We
but
keep saying
it happens all the time. That's part of the problem. Like, Boba Fett, when we were growing up, was known as this badass bounty hunter who killed everybody. He didn't care. Like, I mean, that was a lot of the fiction.
hey, he is paid to go around murdering people he doesn't know, and he
Yeah.
goes too far, and Vader has to be like, "Yo, guy, chill out,
Simmer down.
stop vaporizing people."
And then, like,
no disintegrations. Yeah.
and then we
Um,
get Tamora Morrison, who's like, as a human being, seems like such a lovable, affable human being, and like he was great in Aquaman. Like, him and Jason have a great
Very likable dude.
great rapport.
Really.
But
Yep.
I would totally be okay with bringing him back as other clones, and then they're afraid to have just straight out and out villains. And not that Cassian is this, but especially in this part of his story, having seen where we see him in Rogue One, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this guy kind of goes from just really looking after himself to learning about something bigger, but still sticking on that like scoundrel side of stuff. Like Rogue One, ironically, both of these times we've seen this character have just cold-blooded murder.
Yeah,
like both
because
of his
he's a survivalist. He's in the worst situations under this, not just the Imperial Galactic regime and the pressures there, but on his own personal life, he's under stuff, and he's a survivor. He'll do whatever it takes to get through. And when you're an undercover spy going up against like the dirtiest, worst, and murderers and everything, like that's
They're
what you got to
space
do.
Nazis. That's what the Galactic Empire is.
But so that's what criminals do. If you're an undercover spy working in criminal organizations or in a Nazi-like regime, then that's what you got to do. And it's like that's why Han shot Greedo first, because he was also a survivor. Until they said he's a hero, and heroes wouldn't do that. I'm like, nah, man, he would do that because he knows if he didn't, he'd be going back to Jabba, and he'd be carbonite or fed to a Rancor. You know what I mean? Like,
and then in 2019, Greedo went McClunky. So like we're gonna get whatever they're gonna give us.
But so they basically made Han Solo, the Solo film, to show like, no, he would shoot first. Here's why. Because he was a gangster mercenary for a bit, you know what I mean? He had to be. So
talking about a movie that's very, very brown. That whole movie.
Yeah, and do you hear that?
No.
Something dropped upstairs. Oh, okay, good. I gotta get a mic. I mean, nothing happened.
Children? No.
Yeah, I think it's my dog actually, but yeah. So something you said earlier too, I wanted to touch on. We're talking about the timelines, and I mentioned Catalyst. So Catalyst showed the Urso Krennic and the building of the Death Star. This is the Gilroy's ability to have the freedom to tell, of course, the Andor and then eventually K2SO story, and then. While if you read Catalyst, it does a lot of the politicking. It explains all the economics and timelines and inner politics of the Empire, of how they had to like fund and build the Death Star and how they were behind, there were delays, and it ties into the Geonosians who had to be like basically factory workers on this thing. So it actually makes like the worst Star Wars movie, Attack of the Clones, like matter more because the Geonosians actually have a larger purpose and you see how they were treated. This does the same thing, but in live action for Andor, because you're going to in season I mentioned it, but in episode 4 you will see a little teaser of what the politics of it all will be when you meet Genevieve O'Reilly's character and who she interacts with, and there's an interesting room there because I think in the trailers you see shots of the Galactic Senate, so there's room here to see some familiar faces from like the prequel era. And filling in that gap between that and what we saw in A New Hope. So
they're eventually going to run out of time. Like we have jam packed this time frame or timeline between episodes 3 and 4.
But not this part of it, right?
That's true,
right? And honestly, all these stories we keep getting are like Tatooine, Mandalorians, and it's like, well, there's a universe out there, and the best part of Andor, amongst anything, cinematography, production quality, acting, the cast, like everything, they take it seriously. Is that there's no member berries. Every ship you can follow. There's a guy on Twitter, what's the space shipper. He's a well-known like geek person. He on his Patreon for free. He did like a deep analysis of just the starships in the first 4 episodes and how like the inspirations behind them all, how practical they are, how different they are. There's no like TIE fighters or TIE fighter variants to sell a Lego set. You will get familiar ships and later on when you see like the actual Empire step up, and you'll get the TIE fighters, the Imperial shuttles, and the big Star Destroyers. But so far it's none of that. It's like this is a factory planet that's different.
I'm very glad you brought that up because there was one shot that I did. I have to look it up. I don't know if I'm assuming if there was a person dedicated to doing this on Twitter. The ships that we see, the Preox Marina, like the
guards that come down, the
guards that come down, those ships look shockingly similar to clone carriers.
I see what you mean. Well, you know, they've got version of it though.
They've got the ship that there's like
these are like tiny, like really low quality vessels that are coming down.
But they've got the giant ship, and then they've got like the little ones that kind of like pew, like shoot out from it. They look like shrunken versions.
Oh, the pods.
I see. They look like shrunken versions of the clone like carriers. From, I guess.
You can tell it's like just some security outpost of like enlisted people, and it's like very low budget. There's no like they don't even have stormtroopers. They're literally just like guards and security guards. And
and everybody's British because they're always British.
Yeah, well, there's a big ensemble cast of Scottish, Irish, and British actors, and a lot of them have backgrounds doing like EastEnders and other familiar British shows. And you mentioned Sherlock for one of the directors, right? So I think
Mhm.
you get actors like that, but they're quality actors and stage actors too. But you also get some, Mexican actors, right? You get to pair them, so like it's cool. But I'm just loving that we're not relying on lightsabers, Jedi temples, and familiar starships, and
If this is
retconning.
5 years before the Battle of Yavin, technically, now this is not something I want to happen. You could technically see Kanan and Hera, because Rebels does start 5 years before New Hope.
It could be. I mean, I
I don't
think
want that though. Like, there is a version of this show where that would work, but 3 episodes into this, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to hear
yeah,
anybody's names I know. That's
it,
the benefit of this.
you could on a singular like 3 episode story arc where they go on a mission in season 2 or something, but they're not going to do that because if you watch Rogue One, the Jedi are the idea of faith and the Force is like almost like a background thing, and there are two particular characters and a planet all about that, and you still don't get lightsabers and such. So I don't think you're going to get that. Um, Here we go.
If you're watching on stream, it's a
Some
Funko
Donnie
Pop
Yen
of
action.
Curate Imwe.
One of my favorite interviews I ever did, by the way, because I went
I'm
into
so
it with
excited for him in John Wick 4. Katanas, bulletproof suits, and pistols.
good for him, man. He deserves it all. He's a workhorse and it's super talented and it's like hyper intelligent too. Like he's a cool dude.
So for the
Yeah,
remainder of the watch, because you did say you watched all four in a go, are you gonna wait? Because I mean, obviously you can next week or the week where this week, date of recording, or are you gonna watch it all in one go? Because I know you are not a fan of weekly television.
I know, but I'm stuck to it now. All these services except Netflix, knock on wood, are doing it though. Like
Oh, I don't know
I'm
about
stuck in.
Netflix.
Yeah, they may move too, but you know what? They are trying to keep subscribers. And if they do something that angers subscribers or tries to trick subscribers into having to watch a show over 2 months just so you subscribe for 2 months versus binging it and leaving, like that, more anti-consumer moves means you're going to lose more people. So, they can't. I think they probably will for some shows, maybe, but like if they they're struggling to gain subscribers and keep subscribers, doing an anti-consumer move is not a positive. Netflix is not Disney where they sell merchandise weekly for their stuff,
Mhm.
right? That's a different model. Nor are they HBO, who has a history of that
Can
kind
we
of
have a
release
Cobra Kai
schedule.
pop-up store in Toronto? That'd be amazing.
Oh, geez, yeah.
I want a Miyagi-Do shirt.
I'm surprised there's not more of that. By the way, oh man, we keep going tangents, but they're bringing back the Karate Kid like movie universe as well. Like,
Yes, but nobody involved in Cobra Kai is involved. So, like, is this a
but they're saying it's the
Jaden's?
same franchise. Like, what is it? Like, is it going to be like?
I
I don't understand.
I
This
don't.
is them. Like that is it is the franchise. It's
But we forget and we can connect this back to Andor. Adria Arjona, or it might be Arjona because she's Puerto Rican,
Mhm.
was in Morbius, and Sony has no idea what they're doing. So they probably see Cobra Kai is successful. I'm glad you brought up the whole subscription thing, though, with Netflix. There are 3 shows right now that I use my Netflix for because I finished Camp Cretaceous. Ben, if you're listening to this, you're welcome. That was a lot. Um, Umbrella Academy, which is coming to an end, which is, I'm glad at least gets a final season because most Netflix shows don't. Cobra Kai likely will get a season 6 just based on the fact, and I mentioned this, I guess it was last week. There's no way it's expensive to shoot, and usually one of the biggest factors in a Netflix production is ultimately comes down to cost. So that's probably safe. And Sandman, I love Sandman, and the only benefit is that Neil Gaiman has said if Netflix doesn't want it, we can sell it somewhere else. And Prime has a history of saving shows that people really love. The Expanse, check it out. And so I don't know. But as somebody with 2 small children, and I am enjoying the weekly release of this. I'm glad we got 3 in the for the
They
premiere.
had to. It's too slow. You can't do this over 12 weeks. That'd be insane.
Well, and it seemed like a lot of the conversation was 1 and 2 are really slow when 3 happens. And I actually had this conversation with my wife. I'm like, I actually think it's the perfect slow burn into action. Because like you're getting little pieces. Fiona Shaw, I really like her character as being like the mentor for Cassian.
Yeah,
And
that's
one
cool.
of the things we haven't brought up yet was, and I love that they did this, particularly with something else you mentioned Hulu earlier, where Dan Trachtenberg did a Comanche version of Prey. We get
Yeah.
on Canary. We get, I don't know, this may be just a me thing, but I've watched the show twice, and I watched it on my PC and on my TV through a Fire Stick, where there were no subtitles
There are
for.
intentionally no
Okay,
subtitles.
so I'm glad that they
Yeah.
did that. Like, it is a vaguely Spanish sounding language, but and this comes down to good direction and good, well, script notes for the actors. Everything is sold in the expressions and the reactions between the everybody in Canary. Like when we see young Cassian and him reacting to his sister, one thing I did think, and it's funny that this happened, was in the very beginning of the first episode where he goes to a brothel-esque location and is looking for his
Mhm.
sister. That's essentially the very beginning of Warrior. I thought was quite
Oh,
funny. Yes. Which is a show
I'm
you
gonna
should
watch
check
it.
out. Also on HBO, season 3 coming HBO Max 2023. Gonna be real sad when that gets canceled because that's what HBO Max has been doing.
Yeah, I love that background story, and you see bits of it in the teasers, but it's very unexpected for
Mm-hmm.
casting, so it's kind of cool. I love that he's getting that. This is something people wanted from like Poe Dameron when they started like the saga and stuff like that. But
Dash Rendar? Let's get a
you,
Dash Rendar
but
show?
but think of the saga films and how like those characters and their stories and how and all the like the dialogue moments, how like goofy and cheap that seems in my memory versus what I'm seeing in a single episode of Andor. Like I feel like this is the first time Disney's taking live action seriously to me because it's like, and then there are bits of this The Mandalorian to be sure, but then you have this goofy comedy scene and some weird shots, and then you also get now it's just full of cameos. It's like it's which is cool. I do want to see that because they're bringing what we love about Rebels to life, so that's cool. But I'm glad to see like, hey, look, war and economy and politics are actually part of the universe, and these things actually matter when there's a dictatorship taking over the whole galaxy. We should probably explain why that's important. You know what I mean? No one cares about Tatooine. Stop going there. You know what I
Well,
mean?
and
I
it's
get it. Everyone's a Jedi. There's a billion Jedi left during the Jedi Purge. And there's not just the rule of two, there's a rule of 2,000. Everybody's a Sith, and everybody's got more Sith. There's Sith for days, baby. No, no. Stop it. We get that sells toys, but please give me stories.
it's funny though because the cartoons stick to those rules, which is hilarious. It
Yeah, well, but look, I love the story arcs and characters because they have time. That's the best part about the animated shows. They have time to do things,
Mhm.
and because it's animation, you can do like more elaborate, bigger set pieces and stuff like that. But there's some really goofy, dumb stuff I think in those
Oh,
shows too.
100%. Like
Like
at
especially
the
with
end
the
of the day,
Force
it's
and the
still a
temples,
cartoon.
they did some really goofy, dumb stuff that to me doesn't fit the canon, and they don't play it off yet. There's even like a time travel element in Rebels, right?
Yes, there is.
Like,
There
and
may or may not be a time window, which I'm
how
not going to complain
ups
about because what it gave
like
us moving forward.
but did you have to use that plot device, which breaks the entire franchise potentially,
I
to do
mean,
that? Like,
but if they don't use
weird.
it again, it's fine. It's the same thing with the
If they don't
MCU.
use it again, it doesn't make sense because someone did that construct exists for a reason and it was created by someone. And if like, what is the High Republic going to explain it? I don't know. Like,
That
and
that character currently who did use it may or may not be dead, and he may or may not have just been cast for the Ahsoka show. So
yeah,
you're gonna have
so
to go back and listen to that episode. I'm just
it's
gonna.
just so like that stuff it's increasing the more I think back on the saga and that stuff like they've taken it too far into like the goofy cheap gimmick territory to sell stuff and they've broken the quality of the franchise. They can never repair the fact they have so many dumb story elements because it's canon, and you
Mhm.
can't just keep breaking canon because now you have two dumb things and it's like it's irreparable. So the best we can get from me as someone who's getting frustrated by low quality pro storytelling and gimmicks is like this Andor, finally, quality. And we're getting the same problems on Marvel as well. Like, we just talked about maybe my favorite two Marvel shows so far, She-Hulk and Miss Marvel. But Miss Marvel has incredibly huge story problems, I think. And and I think She-Hulk is fun. I don't really have a problem with She-Hulk, to be honest. It's just not. Some people demand stories and big this, big that, but no, I'm
She-Hulk
cool with
is
that.
exactly what they've marketed it as, and
It's
while
exactly what it
watching
should
it,
be.
yeah,
Yeah,
I have
it's
no
fun.
problems with
It's
it
awesome.
whatsoever.
I have no problems with that at all.
I
Maybe it
think
is the best one. Yeah.
it's all right. So if you're listening, we're done talking Andor spoilers, and we're just kind of shooting stuff, wrap up tangents. But I think ultimately where the MCU not breaking point, because I'm not gonna pretend I won't be there day one for stuff, but it is the use of the title, the character, the product, the tone, the writing direction. Does that fit ultimately what you are trying to do? And it feels like a lot of Phase 4 has been mistakes and completely like errors for no reason, where it seems like when they are successful, it seems like an accident with some stuff.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a lot of going through the motions. And you look at a movie like which kicked it all off, and it was overdue. It was like the Black Widow movie. Like you had the potential to do something different and weird and awesome, and dark, and like the Americans. I keep bringing that up because like we literally have the blueprint. Just take the best parts of that, pick 2 hours of awesomeness. You have like superstar actors you can pull from. Why did it play out like that? Why are the VFX so goofy? Why are the action set pieces look like this? Like look at the characters you have and think. Who does that? Just look at the John Wick films. Like, just do a bit of that. Atomic Blonde. You can do action without having a CGI explosion in the middle of the sky. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand it.
Pew-pewed.
Yeah, they do a lot of. I hate to say that because tons of people work on this. There's tons of development went into that, but it does feel like they're just going through the motions on broad strokes, even though they're not. But it's like they just pump that out to get it out, and it's like, man, why didn't they look at that and be like, how? Literally have us sit around the table. How do we make this better when you're looking at previews or the storyboards? And it's like, let's not have CGI fire explosion in the sky
I think,
or sky base. You know what I mean? Like that is not what I think of Black Widow secret super assassins, right? Like,
the problem is they've made the Black Widow like 4 times, but not called it Black Widow. Like we had Atomic Blonde, we had Red Sparrow, which is fine. There's been
is it the Jennifer Lawrence one? Yeah, that was okay.
But it is interesting to talk about Marvel's kind of, and Disney. I mean, it's all Disney at the end, but their reactions to reception might finally be positive in, like, for the consumer, where there's been and we've talked about it, a lot of issues with, I mean, Boba Fett, but even like the parts of Mandalorian season 2 that people didn't like, and skewing this to it's ironic to talk about them at all, but like when Warner Brothers was initially doing the DCEU, it's like filmmaker driven, and Andor feels like the Gilroys are like, they're like, we loved how you saved Rogue One and made it a very, very good movie. Can we do, like, we'd love to do Cassian Andor. We didn't even talk about it, and I'm kind of glad we didn't, that the lead of a Star Wars show is somebody who's Latinx. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Star Wars is, having more representation is always a good thing. But they're like, okay, here's what we want to do. And Disney went, fine. And they went and made it. And Marvel, to some degree, is also kind of doing this. There's a reason they didn't go Taika Waititi, Thor 5. Because of the significantly mixed reception to something like, or to Thor Love and Thunder. Yeah. And I'm hoping, because at the end of the day, all that I really care about moving forward with the Disney Plus stuff, because unfortunately, a lot of it hasn't mattered to the canon of the MCU yet, is that they, regardless of the fact that they've announced all these things, give them the proper development time to give us something. Like, if, I know we're 3 episodes in, and I may be jumping the gun, and I may listen to this years from now and be like, oh, he was too excited. But if Daredevil is like this, where it's clearly in the MCU, but it's New York, it's disgusting, we get really stupid, not stupid, but like almost remedial law cases that he has to do, and be like, oh, I didn't get this rapist convicted, now I gotta go beat him up. Like, that's Daredevil. And don't shy away from the mature aspect. It's not about the violence or the swearing or the sex. Like, I mean, sex sells, that's undeniable. But if you are treating the stuff with an ounce of maturity, that's what makes the story more interesting, as opposed to references galore and like, hey, look, it's like, I'm excited to see Daredevil to react to, have a conversation with She-Hulk, because that will be fun, and I know that's going to be a different version of the character, and that doesn't break it. There's a lot of ridiculous things in the MCU. People are just burying their heads in the sand and pretending there didn't happen. There were strippers on Iron Man's plane. Yeah. In the first film. So let's not pretend.
Classic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is cinema, and then twerking with Megan Thee Stallion.
Do you remember Mickey Rourke had a bird on set?
I want my bird. Like
And a
Samuel
Russian accent.
Rockwell was. I mean, he needs to come back at some point. If he's
He
not
will.
in
Armor Wars, baby, let's go.
I'm not watching it. I will not watch Armor Wars if Sam Rockwell's not in it. Like I'm
You
not.
made a joke about that kind of being not in this. That's Secret Invasion sets up Armor Wars. It is a thing. So like, just so
I'm
we're
very
clear.
curious about stuff moving forward. But yeah, like I think it is a testament to good writing, and it's also hilarious to me that in the marketing for this that they were talking about the Bourne Legacy, which kind of killed that franchise for a little bit. But
I think it's an okay movie. If they properly connected them right at the end and did a follow up proper, like they planned, then I think it would have been great. But
Jason
instead we got
versus
that last. What was the last one
Ross.
called? Just Bourne.
Jason Bourne. It was just called Jason Bourne.
I honestly, and I love that franchise. I couldn't even finish it. I couldn't handle Alicia Vikander's accent, and it was just boring. I don't know.
It has
like 45
way
minutes
too
in.
much Paul Greengrass all over the place. Like
that's what killed Supremacy for me. It was just the constant shaky cam.
Ultimatum's a much better film. But yes, so Andor on Disney Plus, it's going to be weekly. So I highly recommend if you are a diehard Star Wars fan, and even if you are more casual, as a great example, like my wife who doesn't really care about Star Wars, she's enjoying it. It's a nice slow burn. It's Rob, if you're watching the stream, has Cassian Andor's coat.
Hells yeah, baby, from Rogue One.
I was very confused for a second. It's on Disney Plus. There's not going to be another review of Andor till the show is finished. Same thing moving forward with House of the Dragon, Rings of Power. I already did Cobra Kai. I watched that over a weekend. So I
have not watched that yet. I gotta catch up on that.
It's very good. Very briefly, I think season 6 would be a perfect place to end that show. Which is where so next week, I do not have anything lined up yet. I'm gonna try to see Bros because it looks hilarious. I may do a retrospective on Avatar because it has been a very long time since I've seen that film. I think the last time was at home, but I'm gonna give it another shot in the theater. I know for sure. I said it was going to be this week. We ran long. I'm sorry, Jermaine. I didn't get to your question, but I will do it next week. We have some fan mail that I'm going to address next week. I can say, without saying who it is, there was a guest who's going to be joining the show for Black Adam. If you follow me on Twitter, I may tease who it is closer to that, but I'm not going to say just in case the person changes. But
by the way, speaking of Black Adam, our boy DJ Dwayne Johnson is coming to Toronto on October 13th for Black Adam.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Yeah, doing a special fan thing.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Rob Keys, for coming on the show. You can find Rob at Twitter. That's Keyes.
Rob _ Keys.
_
On Twitter.
On Twitch, FailCube. Is your Instagram public or is it private?
No, it's public. It's
public.
FailCube as well. I'm not most active, but I should be. I have some Star Wars things. You talked about your Mastercraft lightsaber. I've had a box of lightsabers upstairs. I've been sitting there for 2 weeks. I've not opened it yet.
Well, you just got to wait till both of your kids are old enough to hold them, and then they can fight.
My daughter loves coming to the studio and like picking up. I have the Lord Revan lightsaber, and she just picks it up. And it changes the color from red to purple. It just walks around hitting boxes with it.
That's amazing. We didn't even talk.
I got a bunch of those.
I'm super looking forward to Tales of the Jedi, like just one-off Star Wars stories to kind of fill in stuff. Yeah. Super looking forward to that.
I'm curious about the Acolyte just because it's like new ground. They can do whatever they want, and I don't know. To be honest, I have a pile of books in the High Republic Publishing Initiative, and I haven't read any of it, and no one's talking about it. But I'm curious if like how serious Star Wars is about moving
out of the
focus there, right?
I'm not sure. I have the first audiobook, but I'm currently working my way through Act 2 of The Sandman.
There's like so much at once without any movies to kind of propel it, so it's hard to kind of get into because it's like, and also
probably not getting a Star Wars movie till at least 2025.
Yeah, because they pretty much canceled Rogue Squadron, and we don't know what's going on with Taika's movie or whoever.
Do you think he gets? What's his name? Who did Jurassic Worlds? What's that guy's name? Who did the Jurassic World films? And he did Book of Henry.
Colin Trevorrow?
Yeah. Do you think he's gonna get Trevorrow'd? And they're like, oh.
No, I'm not even sure Taika's gonna make a Star Wars at this point.
No, but that's what I mean. Like, Trevorrow was gonna do Rise of Skywalker. He made Book of Henry, and I mean, not that they're necessarily related, but for the sake of this narrative, he never made Rise of Skywalker. Although financially, Thor: Love and Thunder was successful.
At least for a week and a half. Yeah, then it kind of tanked immediately.
Overall box office, I think it broke 700.
It's huge.
Right?
It's huge. But they know they wanted $1 billion, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
like especially after the massive success of Ragnarok, which...
I think they're looking at Multiverse of Madness and Thor: Love and Thunder. Like, maybe we went too far and didn't deliver on the thing people really, really wanted. We can talk all day about how much multiverse there is in Multiverse of Madness. And then Love and Thunder, just like they just kind of forgot that like kind of characters and story kind of matter. You can't just like throw gimmicks and craziness everywhere. Again, back to the gimmick stuff, and this goes back to the High Republic part where it's like they chose an era which is not the Old Republic, which fans want. It's not the current stuff which they underdelivered on. It's just in between thing where everybody's got a lightsaber. And also Yoda's there.
The Knights of the Old Republic game the remake that was supposed to come out, maybe never happening. So
yeah,
anybody
it's
invested
like, guys, you have the blueprint. Like, stop dodging it. It's not hard. Like, I want to be in the room and be like,
who's having a harder time? Warner Brothers? Actually, well, we don't have time for this.
I mean, you know the answer to that.
I do know the answer for this. Yeah.
Let me tell you one more thing. I didn't answer your question up front.
Okay.
You were saying how I'm going to rewatch Andor. I think
Yes.
I'm probably sometime next week. I'll just do like one of my late nights where I'm just burnt out and sit down and watch 2 hours of TV, and I'll watch all four when after, was it Wednesday it drops, episode 4?
Thursday. I don't know. I think.
I feel like it's Wednesday and She-Hulk's Thursday. Am I wrong?
That's right. You are correct. Yes, because
And
they
then
moved
Friday
the
we
Marvel
get-
stuff to Thursday.
Rings of Power and
I haven't started that yet. That's the thing I'm waiting till it's done.
I'm enjoying it, but there's a very clear reason why there's so much less buzz right now for Rings of Power than there is for Andor and Game of Thrones. And it is worth watching though, but it's just not. It doesn't feel as epic or grandiose or as intense as these other things.
It
just feels
looks
like
expensive.
Yeah, I mean, you see it as you watch it, especially if you're watching it on like a big TV 4K. Like, you really does shine through. It is shiny. There's a lot. You'll see what I mean. But yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't. It feels fine. It feels very respectable of like the Peter Jackson films as well, like, ignoring the Hobbit craziness. But like, it does fit into me. Like, this for sure is a couple thousand years before Lord of the Rings, the movies, and they would tie in nicely. But it's kind of like it doesn't have the hook that the other ones have right now. So a lot of weekly shows now for me, which is unfortunate. It's not my style.
And I'm currently listening to 2 rewatch podcasts, so that's also 2 shows that I have to throw in there right now. If you want to follow along with me, it's Smallville and Boy Meets World. I'm doing those.
Oh, you're the Michael Rosenbaum, Tom Welling.
I am. I'm doing that weekly.
Yeah.
It's a fun trip through memory lane and some yacht rock of the early 2000s. So
wow.
It's a thing. So yes. So I'm not exactly sure what's coming up next week. There will be a mailbag. I don't know what the review is. If there's enough mailbag questions, it may just be a mailbag. That's it. I will see you next time.